Hello, and welcome to Melomaniax, the podcast where we take unbiased deep dives into the biggest musicians and bands of all time. I'm Ashton.
And I'm Dallas. Today we are going to be talking about the sweet, sweet harmonizing sounds of Sister Hazel. But first, don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube if that's where you're listening to this. Follow us on our socials, Instagram and TikTok. Most importantly, please hit us with those 5-star reviews if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you're listening to this. And we appreciate that for sure. That helps us keep this show growing as much as we can. Also, we have a Patreon that is live. We offer a $5 a month tier. Gives you access to our Discord, as well as a shout out on one of our episodes and the ability to vote on future episode topics. So, Sister Hazel, what do we know before we do the deep dive?
Dude, this is a band you showed me. Although I think you were more like, bro, you kind of presented it like you've heard their music and then, like put it on. And then as I went through,
I have a lot of history with this band, actually.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think you'll have a lot of input on this one, but I definitely was listening to the discography and was like, man, I don't think this song was on the radio, but I know it, so it had to be Dallas like showing it to me, and so there was a lot more just like popping up that I recognized. They almost are like, bro, I was like trying to come up with like a fusion. They're kind of like Hootie and the Blowfish, but like mixed with the Eagles, I guess, with like they do a lot of harmonies, like so many. Every single like song has like some really spot on harmonies, so like that's why I kind of like highlighted that. That's like one of the biggest highlights for the band in my opinion. And then of course you and I always joke about that they're like perfect like tailgating music or just like summer with the windows down in a car type thing. Like flawless band.
Yeah, it's hard to be in a bad mood and then put on Sister Hazel and keep being in a bad mood. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good way to put that.
Like imagine for a second listening to any Sister Hazel song with like an angry face, like I'm gonna book you up. Like you just can't do it.
That's what the Harley guy's listening to while he's working on his Harley out there.
Exactly.
And not Godsmack.
Hatebreed and
not Godsmack. They're listening to Sister Hazel.
Yeah, it's very different vibes. Changes the whole scene. You're like, maybe he isn't beating his wife.
Maybe not.
So one of my first memories with Sister Hazel, so All For You came out early. And I remember hearing that on the radio and it being everywhere. And, my babysitter at the time playing it and all that stuff. So I knew that song. And then I started getting into guitar. And my friend Sterling, you remember Sterling? He came over one day and he was like also kind of a little bit into guitar, but it was clear that I was getting way more into it way faster than he was. So he tried to trick me one day and he brought it over. He was like, man, I wrote this solo. I want to see if you could play it. And he just put a tab in front of my face. So I started playing it and working through it. And it when I finally got it all down, he was like, I didn't write it. It's the solo from All For You by Sister Hazel.
Nice.
So that's pretty funny. I was probably, I had to have been like 13 or something at that point. I don't know. But, and then, I didn't really dig into their discography for a long time. Then I was in college and I saw like a quick clip or something of them online. I was like, oh, these guys are amazing. I'm going to dig deeper into them. So I started digging into them there. Also, their song Your Winter was in the movie. It's Heath Ledger's movie. Is it 10 Things I Hate About You? One of those movies Heath Ledger's in. And this song is in a really prominent part of the movie and it plays out in a really interesting way. And it's immediately made me be like, oh, I like that song. Who is that? Looked it up. Sure enough, Sister Hazel. I was like, oh, crazy. That's when I decided in college to be like, it was probably freshman year, sophomore year, to be like, all right, let's start listening to everything they have. And I had a roommate at the time, Calvin, and he was also happened to be a huge Sister Hazel fan. I had no idea. So I just started playing Sister Hazel. He's singing along to all the songs, and I'm like, dude, do you know all these? Like, he knew all of them. So we ended up kind of bonding over that, and he got me a little deeper into it. And then I watched their full concert. I can't remember. I think it was in Florida somewhere where they're from. I think they're from Florida.
They are from Florida.
And it was, I can't remember the concert. You could find it, I'm sure. It's just a full concert of theirs, and they're all standing on rugs. They each have their own rug on the stage. And it was just such a good show, like just expertly done. I like how you said, Hootie and the Eagles. I feel like that's a pretty good, assessment of who they are. But they're a little more like, progressive's the wrong word, but they're a little more like good than Hootie. I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but like
musically,
they're more musically like more advanced than Hootie, I would say.
Yeah.
Like they do stuff that is not just necessarily strumming and singing, and their harmonies are just out of this world, like you said. They're really tight band. There's a lot of stops and starts and crazy like syncopations that everybody's doing, and the Eagles definitely have more of that. So I like how that kind of the harmonies. I like saying that. That's good. Hootie and the Eagles. That's a pretty good assessment of who we have with Sister Hazel. And so when I started going through their discography, I definitely have some that jump out as my favorites, but I realized they don't really have a bad song. You know what I mean? There were really like, you could put on, especially some of those earlier albums, there's really no skips. Like they're not all, stellar. Some are, but there's none that I'm like, skip this one. I don't like that. That didn't happen. Like it was just kind of like, oh, they all kind of have that happy tailgate rock vibe. That's just so nice.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. That was kind of how my impression was going through. It was nothing really skips. I do like that they ended up adding like a full band to All For You. So they released just an acoustic version on their first album, and then the next album had with the drums and stuff, and I like that version.
Yeah, that's the one everyone knows, the full band version.
Yeah, but we'll I guess we'll jump into that. Yeah, we'll dive in. So Sister Hazel was born the same year I was. 1993 is when they started. And they formed in Gainesville, Florida, like you said, Florida band. And the name of the band came from a local missionary named Sister Hazel Williams. And she ran a local homeless thing for you then. Homeless shelter.
That actually reminds me. Can you name another band that came from Florida that named themselves after like an older adult, like in their life?
Yeah. The Backstreet Boys named themselves after Backstreet Boy, prominently known.
Dr. Boy.
Yeah, Dr. Boy.
This guy's trouble. Worst superhero. No, Leonard Skinner.
Oh, nice. With some changing.
I'm pretty sure it was Florida, but I'm certain that they were named after their gym teacher, Leonard Skinner. They just changed it up, added a bunch of Y's.
I didn't know they were from Florida. I figured.
I'm pretty sure it's from Florida. I'll confirm that while you continue, but I'm almost positive.
I just assumed, they had the song Sweet Home Alabama, that they were from Alabama or Mississippi or just somewhere
they're
down
from
there.
Jacksonville.
Jacksonville? Okay. That still feels kind of like that whole area.
Yeah, it's all America.
Yeah.
All right, sorry. Sure. Anyway, back to Sister Hazel Williams. That's a dope name, by the way. Hazel Williams. That's cool.
Right? So the original group, actually, I believe it was started, they were saying in an interview, it was just two of them, Ken Block and Andrew Copeland, to start. And Ken Block is the lead singer, and Andrew Copeland does rhythm guitar and does a lot of the backup vocals and harmonies that you hear. Those two are like the main.
He takes lead on a few songs as well.
Yes, he does do some lead vocals. I don't know why. I have to take a side note real quick. I am so sorry. I've been meaning to bring this up on our episodes for a while now. When I look up people and you Google them, usually it'll say like guitar player or whatever. It has a little under their name. It'll say what they do. They're always incredibly weird. Like it's never what they actually do. Like
Really?
Who was it? It was like someone for Aerosmith, and it just said violin, and it was like Steven Tyler, and I was like, what? Like that's not right. But I just there was one specific that I was trying to remember that I looked it up, and I was like, that is not what they're known for at all. I don't know why it says that.
Yeah, Steven Tyler says American singer-songwriter.
Okay, so it wasn't Steven Tyler. There's someone that I looked it up, and it says like mandolin or something like that when they're like the lead singer, and I was like, that is strange. But anyways, let me get back on track. So it was just Ken Block and Andrew Copeland, and then they added bass player Jet Perez, and so they were a trio. So duo to trio, and then they actually wouldn't add the other two members, which is Ryan Newell, who plays another guitar player and singer, and then Mark Trojanowski. Yeah, I think I got that. And that's the drummer. They would be added to the band after their debut album. So they were just kind of like a little trio of singing and playing guitar to start. And I believe all the songs were written by Ken Block to begin with. He was their main songwriter.
Nice. So they actually released their debut album under their own independent record label called Croaking Poets. How do we feel about that name?
I don't know
How do we
why.
feel about the name Sister Hazel, actually?
I like Sister Hazel. I think that's a good band name.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's
One
a
of the
good band name. I
rare.
think it fits them. Now, I don't know if it fits them or if it's just been their name for so long that, of course, it's their name. There's nothing else it could be. You know what I mean? But I think it gets a pass on the shitty band name list because it's just comes from a person. You know what I mean? I feel like that kind of it didn't just come out of thin air.
Yeah,
I
that
feel
makes
like
sense.
it kind of fits. So anyway, they released this album under Croak and Poets, their label, and their debut album was self-titled, released sometime in 1994. No exact date was found, and there's no sales or charts to discuss with this one, obviously. But I do want to highlight this album actually had the acoustic version of the song "All for You," that would later go on to be, I believe, their biggest hit, like we discussed earlier. Once they kind of fleshed it out, made it a little more full. This album, if I remember the cover correctly, is like it's kind of funny. This is the album that I always skip.
This is yeah,
As I
it's
say there.
well, it's like all acoustic. There's no drums on it, which kind of
Yeah,
makes me
the blue
not
font, the
extremely
flower, yeah.
interested in it. Yeah, it's just an acoustic
It's
album,
it's not
early stuff.
I wouldn't, and I know they call it this, and it is technically their debut album. I wouldn't call this their debut album. It's more like a warm up, like a little EP.
Yeah, I was
like,
gonna say it feels
here
more
we
like
go,
an EP.
you know?
Yeah, it feels more
Yeah,
like an
and the
EP
album
than an
after
album.
this, I would call their first, and then their next few after that, which we're going to get into in a minute, are like all their best stuff in my opinion. So let's enough about that. Let's jump into their second album.
Yeah, and on top of that, like they didn't have two of the members in the band that would be like their permanent members. So it really does feel like
Yeah,
their
it's like
second album.
it's not them yet. Let's give
Yeah.
them a pass on that one.
Exactly. So their next
Not saying
debut
it's
album.
bad, by the way.
What if every album you release is just debut album? Just called it
Just
that.
keep calling it. Well,
Yeah.
our debut album. It's like, dude, it's your eighth album. I see them all on Apple Music. Like
Johnny
yeah,
Cash
it's
is
their
trying
debut
that.
album. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
His 80th album. They're like, debut.
Johnny, you're 60.
Yeah.
You've released an album a week for the last 600 weeks.
This is the first time I've released an album since I turned 59, so I feel like it's a debut. Just over and over. Anyways,
Yeah.
we're gonna go ahead and jump into the second album that now has all 5 members of the band in it, and that's called Somewhere More Familiar. And this album was released February 25th, 1997. They initially released the album under their own label, and it sold about 30,000 copies. But shortly after the release, Sister Hazel was picked up by Universal Records, and they re-released the album under the new label. And the album actually climbed to number 47 on the Billboard 200, so not bad. The album had 3 singles. The first was the re-recorded version of All For You that now included the full band playing the song. And that actually reached number 11 on the Billboard 100. And 2 other singles were Concede and Happy, which both failed to chart. And then also, shout out to the song We'll Find It, which was in a soundtrack for a movie, The Wedding Planner. And this album did manage to go platinum on the re-release, so pretty successful start from a independent band, you know.
For sure, getting picked up like that. That's going to help you for sure. I think this album is another one where it's like, you know, it does have All For You and maybe a couple others, but I think this one they still haven't hit that sweet Sister Hazel sound quite yet. They're almost there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you can, because it just feels like a more refined version of that first album. But they're still they have that one song, but everything else was like, it wasn't a bad album to listen to by any means. But I know what you mean. Like the next one is it the next one? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, that's what we're getting into right now. So
I
moving
think the
right
next
along
one is
to
the good one.
Yeah, it's album number 3, Sister Hazel's Fortress. That would be released on June 27th, 2000. So Fortress hit number 63 on the Billboard 200. Hard to find any sales info beyond that. It did have 3 singles released. The lead single was Change Your Mind, which is that hit number 59 on the Billboard 100. Second single was Champagne High. That only landed on a minor chart. Third single was Beautiful Thing, which failed to chart. All 3 of those songs are awesome. That whole album is awesome, top to bottom, in my opinion. And here's a fun fact. They worked with producers Mike Klink, who we know from Guns N' Roses. He did Appetite for Destruction, Motley Crue, and Heart. Richie Zito, who worked with Cheap Trick, and Paul Ebersold, who worked with Three Doors Down. So how many stories do you think they got to hear from those guys?
Dude, I feel like that was, that had to be a really fun time in the studio, not gonna lie. Just like so much knowledge between the 3 of those guys and just like getting to hear all the bands they worked with. And I didn't really get to hear like too much of what their inspirations were, but I'm sure like they probably listened to every single one of those bands and loved them all. So I'm sure that was like
Yeah. Oh
absolutely
yeah, for
awesome.
sure. And that's a crazy crew of producers you wouldn't expect to put out an album that sounds like Fortress, you know?
Yeah, that was also what I was thinking. Kind of like putting that out there, like, man, these are some like harder sounding like bands, and then they work with Sister Hazel, so maybe that's because of that. What you were talking about, how they're a little more musically, I don't know, they're more than like Hootie, but like mechanically, like I don't know, their music is a couple steps up and has a little intricacy to it.
Yeah, that's a good word. The only one I can speak to is Mike Klink, and the reason Guns N' Roses chose him, they went with a bunch of different producers, and they were trying to find the right one. The reason they chose Mike Klink was because he was the one that came in and messed with their sound the least. He came in and was just kind of like, "You guys got it. I just want to capture it." You know what I mean?
Ah,
So maybe I'm sure that's kind of how he works. He probably brought that over to this, and they might have appreciated that. But anyway, moving on.
gotcha. Sounds like Guns N' Roses didn't want any feedback. They're like,
no, they were not good at taking directions.
Yeah, we know what we are. Yeah, get out of our way. So anyways, Sister Hazel ended up leaving Universal Records in 2003 and followed up by releasing their fourth album under Sixth Man label, is what it was called. Chasing Daylight would be released February 4th, 2003. The album actually peaked at number 177 on the Billboard 200. This album had two singles released to promote the album. Your Mistake was the first single, which only managed to hit a smaller chart. And the second single was Life Got in the Way, and shared the same fate as the first. And then also going through, this is where I was like, this is about where I got through the discography, where I was like, man, I'm knowing a lot of songs actually from these albums, moving along, and was like, this is really good. I really like the song Your Mistake. That's a good one.
Yeah, Life Got in the Way is good too. But you know what? As we're going through this, and I kind of felt like this too, just kind of realizing their career. It seemed like that first album doesn't seem like that first album was their peak. That kind of sucks. You know what I mean?
Well, it's not,
because All For You was a huge song, like number 11 on the Billboard chart. Like that's huge.
Yeah.
And so obviously that's what propelled the album sales and and all these different things. But then it's just like from then on, it was just trying to get there again. And it just never gets there. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, I'm not sure if, I guess you're always trying to attain success, but the whole fact that album was big because they were actually under a major label, they never go under a major label again. Like they either do independent releases or small labels. Like they really seem to stay out of the limelight of the really big labels. So that's probably plays into a little bit of why they don't have as much like sales success or Billboard charting as that first one, because they just had that huge label to push their music, and then they kind of just stay under the radar with like smaller labels for the rest of their career. So I wonder if that's like a conscious decision, or just no one wanted to pick them up, or
it's someone's conscious decision. Now, is it theirs or the labels? That's the question.
That is the big question.
Looking at their career, it seems like it might have been their label. If I had to guess, something bad or shady went down with a label and they were like, never again. You know what I mean? And then without that label support, it's really hard to get back to that mainstream success. But that seems to me, and this is all speculation, we won't know without talking to them directly. Seems like that's the decision they made, and we're willing to stand by and like, yeah, well, that's fine. We'll sacrifice being the biggest band in the world for, our dignity and integrity and being able to do what we want to do,
Yeah, and they keep their Croakum Poets label that they created alive throughout. I think it's even still going now. Like they have multiple releases under it. So like that, I feel like there is something to them liking the doing stuff independently and probably not having other people have such a big say in your music and your art. So,
right.
But so
about this time, the band actually goes on tour to promote Chasing Daylight. Those two albums, by the way, Fortress, Chasing Daylight. If I were to recommend any of their albums, it would be those two. And you listen to both front to back. I think both are really solid all the way through. And this is when they were starting to gain some attention on the internet. So hardcore Sister Hazel fans dubbed themselves Hazelnuts. What do we think about that name?
I see what they did there. Are you a hazelnut?
Yeah, it's clever. I feel like I would never call myself a hazelnut. I do like Sister Hazel. Don't put me in any group. I don't subscribe to any group.
Yeah.
But I don't like any group, what's the word I'm looking for? Like fan base name. Those always bug me. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know why. It just
Swifties.
kind of, it seems like it becomes a lot of people's full identity. Like that's the only, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I like a lot of stuff, a lot of fandom, Star Wars, Guns N' Roses, different things, different bands, but I'm not like running around like, being weird about it, I guess. I don't know the best way to say it. And hey, enjoy what you enjoy. If you're a Hazelnut, more power to you. You keep this awesome band going. I like it. But yeah, that's a little weird. So the Hazelnuts started posting videos of their live performances on their website, and the blogs were blowing up. So Sister Hazel also released a 2-disc live album following their tour called A Life in the Day. And I think that's one of the things that really helped them was, they sound great on the album, but they deliver equally great performances live. They sound just like that live. And the harmonies are really where you tell a pro band from an amateur band, I think. And they just nail them.
Yeah, that's definitely. And I think this band stayed afloat and kept going just because they have it seems like they have a very dedicated fan base. Like,
oh yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
Like it seems like they have a small group of I mean, I guess that's kind of how the Grateful Dead were. They had like their fan base that just lived and breathed their band. And that's kind of like, it seems like they had like a small group of fans that just were like diehards. And we'll kind of get into some of the things that they do back for fans. But Sister Hazel released their 5th album called Lift on August 24th, 2004. And Lift hit number 184 on the Billboard 200. And believe it or not, this album had no singles released for it. So it did have a cover of Just What I Needed by the Cars, which I thought was cool. I listened to that one. It's good.
Lift also has one of my favorite songs by them. It's called Another Me. It's one of my favorite songs by them. But the album itself is not one of my favorite albums, top to bottom. But I think there was another one on there. I'll find it.
This album also is one of those ones we talked about in the past that has a hidden track after the last song, after like a minute of silence or whatever, and then another song starts playing. So gotta love that. And Lift would actually
In the Moment.
In the Moment
was the song I was thinking of. Really beautiful acoustic song with some fantastic harmonies. Very simple. I don't think it ever gets like big. It's just 2 guys and a guitar. It sounds amazing. And then Firefly is a song called Firefly at the end of the album, which I still use that guitar riff to like check a guitar and like sound check and stuff still.
Really? That's
I didn't
awesome.
even really realize it, but yeah.
Man, I'll have to pay attention to that next time I'm at one of your guys' shows. Just see if I can hear a little Sister Hazel being played. Anyways,
Yeah,
Lift would be re-recorded a year later as part of what was called Lift Acoustic Renditions, which was just like it took quite a few songs from that album and actually just did pure acoustic versions. And then they also re-released their debut album in 2005 due to it being extremely difficult to find in stores. So I guess that's like a cool problem to have. Like, man, we just can't find your guys' album, so like re-release. So that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing there. So Sister Hazel released their 6th album, Absolutely, on October 10. It's called Absolutely, by the way. 2006. New album, new label. They left Sixth Man and released this under what was called Adrenaline/Wandering Hazel Records. The album peaked at number 86 on the Billboard 200. That's pretty good. The album had 2 singles released. The first single was Mandolin Moon. That failed to chart. Second single was This Kind of Love. Also didn't chart. Unfortunate news for this album was that it got leaked through torrent streams before its official release. We should talk about that for a minute. But first, I wanted to say the first song on this album, Shame, is an absolutely fantastic song. One of, if not my favorite, Sister Hazel song. I think it's the first track. It's one of the first couples. And the guitar tone that starts it is like one of my favorite guitar tones. I don't know what they did, but it sounds so good. And then the mix on this album, especially that song Shame, is, in my opinion, head and shoulders above the mix and production and stuff they had on some of their other records, where they sound a little more, like Lift in particular sounded a little more lower budget. Fortress and Chasing Daylight sounded great, but then Absolutely comes back and just sounds like a really polished professional. I really love that one, particularly the song Shame. But I was going to bring back the leaking through torrents. Obviously, that's not a thing really anymore. What do you think about that?
I mean, it really sucks for the band. It was kind of like an epidemic at that time. People were.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. We used to torrent music. Also, my dad was bad about getting me to do it. he would just hit me with a list, and he's like, I want the discographies for all these bands on my iPod. I'd be like, all right,
That's
went to
hilarious.
it. Yeah.
You're like the guy in the chair.
Yeah. Yeah. So like that. And then he always made me do everything for that
It's
kind
going
of
to
stuff.
cost you double. You say
I
stuff
mean,
like that.
Yeah, I definitely, looking back, like, just pay for music, like give the bands and artists, the money they deserve. But it sucks when your stuff gets leaked like early. So that's what happened is the album got leaked before its release on torrents.
Yeah, the leaking, I guess, primarily is what I'm talking about. The torrenting and streaming or stealing, stuff like that.
But like,
That's a whole different argument, which I don't really know which side I stand on. Yeah, it is technically stealing. I see that argument. But now we live in a day of streaming. Is that stealing? I mean, you didn't pay Sister Hazel a dime, and you listen to their entire discography. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Now they got a little bit of revenue from that, so you did give them money indirectly that way through Apple or Spotify or whatever. But I forgot where I was going with that.
Dude, I wonder how it gets leaked. It's got to be
It's
like
about to be so good and insightful and smart.
Just kidding, man. Just went out the window. But I wonder,
Yeah, just gone.
Who
just
leaks
stupid
it?
as I thought I was.
It's got to be somebody.
Usually, it's got to be someone associated with the band, like someone in the studio or
it was an intern for sure.
Could be. It could be anybody. Who knows?
Studio
Could be the band
intern.
themselves. That's been proven sometimes too.
I'll just
Like
build
we're
some
going to leak
hype.
this, make a big deal out of it. Now, in this case, in Sister Hazel, they don't seem like those kind of people, but definitely has been proven in the past where the band themselves leak it, try to make it look like someone else did it, becomes this big thing, and then you find out, oh, they did it all for the pub.
Yeah, definitely doesn't sound like Sister
Anyway.
Hazel, but
That stealing, leaking, torrenting, that's an episode in and of itself I think we should do. I'm going to add that to our list while you continue on here.
true. So Sister Hazel went on tour again to promote the album, and they also started doing annual fan events like the Rock Boat and the Rock Slope. I love that. But basically, the Rock Boat is kind of like the Kiss Cruise, but for Sister Hazel. So, and I still think they do it even today. I was watching an interview somewhat recently. I can't remember if it was pre-COVID or post-COVID, but it was like within the past 5 years, and they were still talking about doing it and how much they love getting to do that. And they actually will always pay like homage to another band whenever they go, and they'll like play covers of that band and dress up like the band and everything and go like full in. And every year it's like they do a different couple of bands. So you really get to see some like, of course you still get a lot of their original music, but it's also cool to see them all like dress up as another band and like play covers. So that's always pretty interesting. So it sounds like it'd be a great time.
That's awesome.
Right?
Real quick. Well, wait. I guess I can ask you.
Go for it.
I can ask you off air. We'll come back to it. I was looking at their tour, and we'll get to all this in a minute. I don't want to spoil it, so let's keep going.
All right.
All right. So, is that where we are? So they released their first compilation album on June 5th, 2007, called BAM, Volume 1. It has some B-sides from Absolutely and some other tracks from previous albums, so some deeper stuff there. Following year, they released a live acoustic album called Before the Amplifiers, live acoustic, on their Croaking Poets label. It has 16 tracks, all stripped down to acoustic format. It's kind of like that Train album, Ashton, that we loved, their first one. The album was recorded just in front of 100 lucky fans, chosen out of over 5,000 entries. Personally, don't love like stripped down stuff all the time. I think there's a right way and a wrong way to do it, and I'm not saying theirs was the right or the wrong way. I'm just saying that's a move when bands do. They do it often. It is not typically my favorite move, but sometimes it can yield some good stuff. What did you think about this one?
Yeah, it wasn't bad. Obviously, playing drums, I like to hear drums. So when you give me an album of no drums, it's kind of going to be a little harder to keep my attention. But, Sister Hazel has such a good acoustic sound. So like, just with the acoustics and harmonies, like, really helps carry, those kind of, like, albums. Specifically this one, like, I only did a one listen through this one. I wasn't going to go back and listen to it more than once. Sorry, guys. But it wasn't bad. I really, like you said, there's not like a bad song, you can just let it play, and like it's great to just like put on in the background, put on while you're driving. So,
Yeah, for sure.
but anyways, on August 18th, 2009, they released their seventh studio album called Release. Release peaked at number 37 on the Billboard 200, which is their best ranking of all their albums on the Billboard 200. So go them. But weird enough, best ranking on the Billboard 200, and this album did not have any singles. But I think that was also because they took a different approach to this album, and they started allowing every member in the band to write songs for it. So they kind of went with that open approach.
Interesting.
Like I said before, Ken was more the lead songwriter for quite a while. And you would see a couple of them show up on the song credits, like throughout all their albums. But then this album, you see everyone's name all over the place. So it started opening the doors for the other members to have their input.
Yeah, interesting. And speaking to singles, having singles or not having singles doesn't really mean anything. The band chooses what is a single and what's not. So they can it's not like it means the song's extra successful or anything. It just means like they decided, all right, we'll put this one out first to generate a little interest for the album. And then this one, and then this one, we think these are kind of the best representations of what we're doing. And then when it's time for the fourth one, we'll drop the whole album, that kind of thing, A lot of times those singles end up being the ones we know because of how they were pushed. But there isn't necessarily, just because a song's a single or not, doesn't mean it's like the big famous song. So they only spent 6 months out of the studio before they hopped back in to work on their 8th studio album, Heartland Highway, which released on October 12th, 2010. And going forward, they decided to keep their format of letting everyone write songs for their albums. Yeah, I think hitting number 37 on the charts would do that for you. Okay, this worked. So the album's lead single was Stay a While, which didn't see any major charts. The bass player described this album as American road trip music. That's literally how we've been describing it this entire time.
Right? I love that.
It's like, that's good. It's good. It's good to know that they're doing that on purpose.
Yeah, right. They know their sound. They're comfortable with their sound. Like they know their market. It's great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So instead of rushing back in the studio like they did previously, they wouldn't be back in the studio for quite a while. And their 9th album, Lighter in the Dark, wasn't released until February 19th, 2016. I don't know why I was about to say 2016, like an actual number instead of the year. Just a brain fart moment. This was the band's first country album, by the way. The album peaked at number 79 on the Billboard 200. The lead single was We Got It All Tonight, and the songs We Got It All Tonight and Karaoke song both featured Darius Rucker. And it's funny because we were just talking about Hootie and the Blowfish, and that's their lead singer. And I think he was a country artist.
All these
at this
Southern
point in
boys,
time.
all these Southern boys were all one family, huh?
Yeah, Darius Rucker he was already doing country 2016. I'm pretty sure.
Oh
that
yeah,
sounds late
so.
enough.
Yeah.
Late enough. He probably had quite a few albums by then. So.
And Sister Hazel throughout their career kind of goes steadily a little more country as they go through.
Dude,
which we're kind of getting into. That's what we're going to get into right now. So they released a string of EPs from 2018 to 2019, and I love the art on these is absolutely fantastic, and the music's good too. The first was called Water, which was released on February 9th, 2018. Then Wind, you see where we're going with this, and it was released on September 7th, 2018. So they're doing about every 6 months. The following EP was Fire, that released on February 8th, 2019. So yeah, another 6 months. Final Elemental EP was Earth, which released on September 6th, 2019. And then on November 26th, 2019, they would combine all 4 of these EPs and release them as an album called Elements. The only single was Roll On By from the Water EP. And the Water EP was also the only one to chart on the Billboard 200 at 96. And that brings us to today, which I did want to point out. Their newest album, which is called Sand, Sea, and Crash Debris, dropped 3 days ago. So their brand new album just dropped right now at the time of this recording. So we can use this episode as a way to kind of help you guys get out there and support some Sister Hazel. It is actually listed as contemporary country. I have not heard it yet. I can't wait to look at it. I will say, Ashley, you need to look it up. It might be the best album art I've seen in a long time.
What was the name of the album?
This album art, Sand, Sea, and Crash Debris. If you go on their website, it's right there. You go to their homepage or shop or something. Yeah, Go to the
Oh,
shop.
dude, that is awesome.
It is gorgeous. And they have a vinyl. I'm just on their website now on their shop. They have CD, blah, blah, blah. They have a gold vinyl, $27, dude. I've never seen vinyl at that good of a price for like a custom thing like this.
Yeah, usually they're all like, I want to say they're
Dude,
all
we
like
had-
$39.99 or something like that for like
No, when we had vinyl in my band, dude, we had to sell it for like $50.
to make
And
money.
that was with, do you want to guess what our profit was on that?
So selling at 50, what? Like,
Yeah.
it must be horrendously low. So like what, $2 or something?
Yeah, it was like $3 or $4.
Ugh.
Like if I had just made people pay cost after shipping and everything, they would have paid like $55. So they ended up paying like 60. And it seems like we're just gouging people. It's like, dude, like that's literally what we're paying for it. Like we're not making any money off these.
Wow.
The vinyl's a tricky thing. Now they're there's other ways to do it. So the way they're doing it, to me, looking at this price, they're going to a batch distributor, buying 1,000 of them at once, which is $9,000, whatever it ends up being, whatever the price is. And then they're able to price them a little more accordingly, ship them out themselves. That's not how we did it. We did drop shipping, which is more expensive. Everybody knows that, but it kind of is how it is. So their new album is out now, Sand, Sea, and Crash Debris, and wanted to let you guys know that. And yeah, that brings us up to current days. The only thing we have left are our ratings.
Yeah, I'm actually looking through their album artworks again. They just have good artwork like throughout their entire career, honestly.
I think the Elemental EPs are really solid.
Those are good.
I think Lighter in the Dark is really good.
Some
of the other ones are a little bit like
I like
a
Fortress.
little bit.
I don't know why.
Those are great. Fortress and Chasing Daylight are fantastic. But then like you have like BAM, absolutely, Before the Amplifiers, Release, Heartland Highway's okay. Yeah. And a lot of these are kind of like, very like kind of low budget looking.
Gotcha. Yeah, none of those ones showed. I was just scrolling through the ones that recommended when I clicked on Sand, Sea, and Crash Debris, and it was just like all the good art and none of the bad ones. So that's why I was like, man, these are really good. Like going through the years. But man, I can't wait to dive into that album. I did not see it, while I was well, that's because it just popped up a couple days ago. So that'll be sweet. But yeah, they definitely have like evolved into country band. They've always had that country-ish sound, and that's just probably because they've done a lot of acoustic guitars and things like that. But now it seems like they're leaning into it a little more. And they actually, in an interview, they said they started getting booked on tours with other country bands, whereas they previously didn't used to be. And they would show up to these country festivals and whatnot. And he said, people would like not know the name Sister Hazel, but then they would go up and play their set and see and people would come up and be like, man, I didn't think I knew who you guys were, but I knew like 8 of your guys' songs and knew all the words to them. And that's just like exactly what that band is all about. And they just kind of love that like surprising, like, man, I didn't know I knew so much Sister Hazel until I listened to them. So they're just kind of like that band that you just remember hearing in the early 2000s and probably stowed those memories away and just never knew it was Sister Hazel. But anyways, let's get into these ratings.
Yeah, for sure. So the way we rate bands on this show is obviously somewhat subjective. We rate them in 6 categories. Those categories are creativity, evolution, replayability, cultural impact, emotional connection, and nostalgia factor. And each of those out of 5 for an average number out of 5 at the end. So let's get started at the top. Astrid, you go first. Creativity, Sister Hazel. What you thinking? Real quick, before you do that, actually, I did want to go ahead and define creativity. We interpret that as creativity within the space. So they're kind of in the pop rock, tailgate rock, slightly alternative kind of space, country as well. How creative are they within that space when you stack up all the other bands that are in that space? Is it a band or an artist that's just kind of more the same, or are they really doing something radically different and crazy unique? Most bands obviously kind of fall somewhere in the middle of that. But where do we think Sister Hazel is?
For me personally, I have them at about a 3. Like they definitely stand above the other bands in their genre a little bit. Specifically, like we said, with the harmonies, I feel like they are phenomenal with harmonies, and they do a really good job of that. Nothing is too intricate, but it is enough to keep you interested. like in their
Yeah, I was
music.
between a
So
3 and a 4 myself, and for those same reasons, I'm putting down a 3, skewing towards a 3 as well. All right, Evolution. I'll go first. I'm going to give them a 3 here as well. Sister Hazel sounds like Sister Hazel. They have some evolution throughout their career, but you kind of always know it's Sister Hazel. You know what I mean? No matter if they're all writing or if Ken's writing or whatever. But I think it's evolved just the right amount for them. I'm not saying like a band like, put it in perspective, a band like AC/DC, Evolution will be a 1. You know what I mean?
yep.
Where that doesn't mean they're bad. AC/DC is amazing, but they didn't really bring anything new to the table in 50 years of rocking, But their creativity would probably be a 5 because no other band sounds like AC/DC. And if you do, you're a ripoff of who? AC/DC, right?
AC/DC,
So
yeah.
that's a high. They're really high on the creativity side and really low on the evolution side. I think Iron Maiden would be another example of that, where they kind of create a sound that no one has and then just stick with it their entire career without changing.
Yeah, that makes
Sister
sense.
Hazel's in some ways the opposite. They're kind of in the middle of both.
Yeah, and that's why I went with a 3 as well. They're not too low. They kind of started with that rockier kind of sound and did make that move, like that kind of evolution into like country. And they started as an acoustic band, then added the drums and stuff, and became more of that like tailgate rock we always mention, and then kind of have shifted into a country sound. So there has been some evolution, just nothing too drastic. They really know their sound and know their limits.
Yeah, that brings us to replayability. I have my number in my head, so I'm not copying you if you hit the right one. Okay, so we have different numbers.
Yep.
I see you put down a 4.
Yeah, I'm at a 4 out of 5 because I really do feel like, at least with those couple of albums, like I'll always be able to put on Sister Hazel. And even I have a couple of their songs in like my wife and I's playlist, but I mean, every now and again, I just go and actually search up their music and just play it, man. Because gosh, I can go back to it always. It's so good. I'm curious to see what you have.
They're actually the rare 5 of 5 for me for Sister Hazel on the replayability.
Oh man, look at this.
It's a band I could just always go back to and always enjoy. Pretty much the same. And it's almost like every time I go back, I enjoy different aspects. So they kind of keep growing on me. You know what I mean? That brings us to cultural impact, which I think will be objectively their lowest score.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I'm between a 1 and a 2.
See, I feel
now
like,
and then I think a 2. I'm going to go with a 2 because of the success of All For You hitting number 11. That ain't nothing. They have a song everyone knows. They have several songs everyone knows. Songs in movies. I'm going to go with a 2 for that.
All right, you convinced me for a 2. I was going to do a 1, just because they stayed on independent labels a lot and kind of stayed low key. But I'm gonna do a 2. You kind of talked me into it. They had some impact.
Yeah.
So.
Songs in big major motion pictures with Heath Ledger and et cetera. So that brings us to our last 2, emotional connection, nostalgia factor. These are both going to come in at a 5 for me. That's rare. I don't think that's ever happened on the show yet.
Yeah, I think this is a show first, actually.
But this is one of those bands for me that I just really have a lot of history with and a lot of connection with, and I really enjoy.
So I'm going to be a 3 out of 5 for emotional connection and a 4 out of 5 for nostalgia. So not bad scores for those. 4 out of 5, I have a lot of nostalgia from, honestly, just listening to them with you in college. That was probably the biggest time we listened to them the most. It's so funny. We just alternated
just
between
driving all over Columbia. Yeah.
Skrillex, Red Hot Chili Peppers, and Sister Hazel.
We had a few different phases. Sister Hazel was a phase. Skrillex was a phase. But then we had one phase that was Glenn Hughes and Red Hot Chili Peppers at the same time together.
That's right.
For the whole spring. That's like all we listened to. Yeah. That brings your total to a 3.2 out of 5 and my total to a 3.8 out of 5, which is honestly a little bit lower than I thought it would be. But I guess that's pushing a 4.
Yeah, it's just those that cultural impact bringing it down a little bit.
That's all right.
But it's all right. They scored well where it matters, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, that brings us to the end of the show. Do you have any closing thoughts or comments as we wrap up our deep dive of Sister Hazel today? I think if you're listening to this and you're not familiar with Sister Hazel, I would really encourage you to go check them out.
Yeah, this was a pretty relaxing discography to get through, if that makes sense. Really easy on the ears.
Yeah.
Easy to get through.
Yeah, it's not like going through, oh God, what would an example be? Ginger, I guess.
Yeah, that one's a lot to take in. Even Sleep Token for me was a lot. I needed multiple listens to really
Yeah, Sleep
get,
Token.
like
Yeah, they
to
have a lot going on for sure.
yeah
Did you
observe.
see, as a quick side note, they're booked to headline Download Festival this coming year?
That's right. You
That's
told me that
usually,
is
dude.
huge.
That's usually only bands like Kiss, Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses, Arrows, like only the biggest bands. And then Sleep Token's there. It's like, wait, what?
That's all,
The
dude. They're
other
on the
two, like
rise.
Slipknot, like, you know what I mean? Download lineup. I'll tell you the other. There's usually 3 days. There's two. It's Green Day and Korn are the other two, to put it in perspective.
Wow. Yeah, that's massive for them, dude. That they're gonna get their name out there.
Yeah, I think they've already done that. But yeah, you're right, man. I really like them. I think they're doing a really artistic thing, and this is not about them, but happy for those guys. They're doing the right stuff. So yeah, wanted to remind you guys, real quickly as we wrap up here, if you're on YouTube, like and subscribe, follow us on socials, Instagram, TikTok at Melomaniax Podcast. Hit us with those 5-star reviews wherever you're listening to this, and check out our Patreon, $5 a month. Get a lot of cool perks there. And I think that'll do it for us. So until next time, we'll see you soon.